The sound of the alarm clock. It doesn't sound like an invitation to a new day, but like the starting gun for a marathon that never ends. Before your feet even touch the floor, your hand is already reaching for your phone, and the bluish light from the screen pours an avalanche of urgencies over you. Emails that arrived in the middle of the night, notifications for projects with crushing deadlines, news from a world that seems to spin faster and more chaotically every day. Coffee is gulped down. In a hurry, the day's plan is already compromised from the start, and an invisible weight settles on your shoulders. It's the feeling that you're not starting the day, but rather trying to survive it, once again. This external chaos is merely a mirror of the internal disorder. The mind, which should be your sanctuary, has become a battlefield. You feel like a passenger in your own life, operating on autopilot, reacting to demands instead of acting with purpose. It's that knot in your stomach. Before a decisive meeting, the mind replaying a small mistake in an infinite loop during the night, the silent frustration upon realizing that your true goals, your dreams, are being buried under a mountain of tasks that are urgent but not important. You know you have the strength to be the master of your destiny, but day after day you see yourself as a drifting boat without a rudder in the middle of a relentless storm. But what if there were a map to navigate this storm? What if you could install a new operating system in your mind? A system forged not in laboratories, but on the battlefields, in the corridors of power of the Roman Empire, and in the minds of the most brilliant thinkers who ever faced adversity. This tool exists. It is over 2,000 years old and is called Stoicism. Not the academic and dusty philosophy you might imagine, but a practical training manual for the mind, created by emperors like Marcus Aurelius and by former slaves like Epictetus, to thrive in the midst of chaos, not just in spite of it. In this video, we will not get lost in abstract theories. We are going to hand you an arsenal, 10 Stoic rules, clear and applicable, that will serve as your anchor in uncertainty and your compass in confusion. You will learn to transform anxiety into action, to convert obstacles into opportunities, and to shield your inner peace from negativity and external criticism. This is not an invitation to suppress your emotions, but to understand and master them. This is your practical guide to stop being the drifting boat and become the unshakable captain of your soul. A manual to become, once and for all, mentally unbreakable. Rule number 1. Focus only on what you can control. If there is one golden rule, a fundamental principle from which all others derive, it is this. Now think honestly about how much mental and emotional energy you waste every day on things that are completely beyond your reach. You worry about a client's reaction to a proposal, about what your boss will think of a report, about the instability of the economy, about the traffic on the way home, or about the opinion of someone who barely knows you. This worry is like banging your head against a wall. It only hurts you, drains your strength, and does nothing to change the outcome. It turns you into a leaf in the wind, anxiously reacting to every puff of uncertainty, instead of being the tree with deep roots that stands firm in the storm. It is here that the Stoics offer us the most liberating tool ever conceived, the dichotomy of control. The philosopher Epictetus taught that the first step to wisdom is to learn to distinguish what is in our power from what is not. In our power are our opinions, our judgments, our choices, our effort, our attitude, and our will. Outside of our power is everything else, the final outcome of our efforts, health, wealth, reputation, and the actions of other people. The source of almost all our suffering, said the Stoics, comes not from external events, but from our mistaken belief that we should control them. The secret to tranquility and strength is not to have power over the world, but to exercise absolute power over your own internal domain. So how do we bring this ancient wisdom into your chaotic reality with practical exercises? The first and most powerful is the circle exercise. Take a sheet of paper right now. Draw a circle in the center of it. This is your circle of control. Inside it, list everything that is 100% yours. Your actions, your emotional reactions, the effort you put into a task, your honesty, your words, the decision to go to the gym, the choice to eat well. This is your kingdom. It is the only place where you are the absolute sovereign. Now, outside of this circle, list everything you do not control, the final result of that task. The opinion of your colleagues, whether you will be promoted, the traffic, the economy, the weather. Look at this sheet. It is your strategic map. All your energy, all your focus, all your concern should be invested only in what is inside the circle. The rest you must learn to accept with serenity, as a farmer accepts the weather. With this map in mind, the next step is to create a mental habit. Become a guardian at the border of your circle. Whenever you feel anxiety, anger, or frustration bubbling up, stop and ask yourself the key question: what in this situation belongs to me? This forces you to pause and separate fact from judgment. The colleague's action is not yours, but your reaction is. The difficulty of the project is not yours, but your effort to solve it is. Take this to your goals. Instead of aiming to get the contract, an external result, redefine it to make the most well-prepared, clear and persuasive presentation possible, an internal process. By doing this, you move the target from the field of luck to the field of your control. Peace of mind doesn't come from securing the result. It comes from knowing that you did, with excellence, everything within your power. The rest does not belong to you. Rule number 2, protect your inner citadel. If the first rule gave you the map of your kingdom, showing you where your true strength lies, this second rule teaches you how to build the walls. Think about your mind. It should be your safest place, but for many it has become a noisy, gateless public square. It is invaded at every moment by the infinite feed of social media, which injects comparison and insufficiency, by the energy vampires at work and in life who dump their complaints and pessimism on you, and perhaps worst of all, by your own inner critic, that voice that incessantly repeats your mistakes and fears. The result is constant mental exhaustion, a feeling of being mentally cluttered, without clarity and without peace. Here, the Stoics give us a powerful image. The mind is a citadel. It is the only fortress in the universe that can never be conquered by an external force, unless its gates are open from within. What does this mean? It means that events, a rude comment, bad news, a failed project, do not have the power to hurt you. They are neutral. What hurts you is your judgment about them, and this is where your responsibility as a guardian comes in. Think of it in a brutally simple way. Would you allow a stranger to enter your house and dump a bag of garbage in the middle of your living room? Never. So why do you allow the negativity of others, toxic media, and useless thoughts to do exactly that to your sacred mental space every single day? Becoming the guardian of your mind requires an active security protocol, starting with what you allow to cross the border. The first step is to institute a rigorous information diet. Think of your feed as your food. Does it nourish or poison your mind? Do an audit today. Unfollow accounts that generate envy or anxiety. Mute group chats that are hotbeds of gossip and negativity. Replace 15 minutes of mindless scrolling with 15 minutes of reading a book that strengthens you. The second step is to learn to use the protective no. Your time and mental energy are your most precious resources. Saying no to an invitation, a favor, or a conversation that you know will drain you is not selfishness. It is an essential act of self-defense. It is you, in the role of a guardian, deciding that the peace of your citadel is more important than pleasing everyone. The second front of the battle is internal. For The negative thoughts that already reside within the walls, you need the sentry practice. Visualize yourself as a guard at a gate. When a thought like, "I am a failure," or "this will never work out," approaches, you don't panic or fight it. You calmly stop it and interrogate it. Ask, "Are you an absolute fact or just my judgment?" Ask, "Do you help me solve the problem or just paralyze me?" And the final question, is this worry inside my circle of control? If the thought is useless, negative, and outside of your control, you, as the sentry, simply deny it entry. You don't argue. You don't engage. You observe it, refuse it passage, and gently return your focus to what is productive and within your power. This is not a violent repression. It is a conscious and serene filtering that, practiced day by day, transforms your mind from a battlefield into a sanctuary of peace and strength. Rule number 3. Use criticism as fuel, not as poison. After learning to focus on your control and protect your mind, you will face the most common and painful test of all, the words of others. Imagine the scene, a scene you know all too well. You spent days, maybe weeks, hunched over a project. You polished every detail, invested your energy, and finally you present it. For a moment, there's a sense of relief, perhaps even pride. Then the feedback arrives. It could be an email with a neutral subject line, a message in the team chat, or a casual comment from a superior. Your finger clicks. I scan the screen and find the sentence. Maybe it's a, "Frankly, I expected more," or "Your approach wasn't clear," or "We need to rethink your contribution here." In that instant, something physical happens. A heat rises up your neck, your stomach tightens into a knot, and your heart races. It's the sting of criticism. It's the immediate feeling of being judged and found insufficient. But the initial pain, the sharp shock, is just the beginning of the infection. The real danger lies in how this moment turns into poison and begins to circulate within you hours and even days later. The external criticism ceases, but your mind takes over the job with frightening zeal. That single negative phrase is put on a loop, echoing endlessly, while any praise that accompanied it is completely forgotten. This echo feeds your inner critic, that voice that whispers your worst insecurities. "I knew I wasn't good enough. Now everyone knows. I'm a fraud." The result is a subtle paralysis. Your confidence evaporates. You hesitate to share your next idea, afraid of being judged again. Creativity, which needs safety to flourish, withers. And a seed of resentment against the one who criticized you begins to sprout, poisoning relationships and collaboration. This is how a few words become an anchor that hinders your progress. To disarm the poison of criticism, Stoicism doesn't offer us a thicker shield, but a smarter mind. The first layer of the antidote is a return to our golden rule, the dichotomy of control. Someone else's opinion is, by definition, something external. It is born from their mind, is shaped by their experiences, and reflects their values. Therefore, it is fundamentally outside of your control. The philosopher Epictetus, who knew the brutality of being a slave, was relentless on this point. He teaches us that when someone criticizes you, that person is not talking about you. They are talking about their impression of you. Why, he questions, should you be disturbed by someone else's interpretation, which may be flawed or ignorant? The real game changer is here. Criticism is not a truth about your essence, but a fact about the critic's perspective. It is a reflection of their world, not a sentence on yours. Marcus Aurelius, the emperor-philosopher, went further, practicing a form of radical humility. But it is Epictetus who presents us with the most powerful and, at first glance, arrogant response to criticism. If anyone tells you that a person speaks ill of you, do not make excuses about what is said of you, but answer, "He was ignorant of my other faults, else he would not have mentioned these alone." Think about the genius contained here. This is not a defense. It is a complete dissolution of the critic's power. It communicates a self-awareness so profound and an acceptance so total of your own flaws that the external opinion becomes irrelevant, almost comical. You are not being attacked. You are just receiving an incomplete report on your imperfections. This mindset moves you from a position of a reactive victim to that of a serene and unshakable observer. Once you erect the fortress of Epictetus's self-awareness, where criticism can no longer hurt you, Seneca, the most pragmatic of the Stoics, invites us to a second level of mastery. He argued that while most criticism is just noise, occasionally our greatest detractors can be our most honest teachers. A friend might hesitate to point out a flaw for fear of hurting you. An enemy, on the other hand, will have no such restraint. He will point out your mistake with pleasure and precision. The wise Stoic is not offended by this. He listens. He treats criticism like a free metal detector, noisy and often poorly calibrated. Most of the time it will beep for worthless junk, the critic's biases, bad mood or ignorance. But instead of getting annoyed by the noise, the master of himself listens with detached curiosity, thinking, could it be that amidst all this noise, there is a small signal of gold, a truth that I wasn't seeing? It is crucial to understand that this approach is not about being passive or an emotional doormat. It is the exact opposite. It's about becoming an intelligence officer for your own life. A spy is not offended by disinformation or the noise coming from his sources. He analyzes them coolly. He takes the raw data of criticism and evaluates it against the most reliable source of all, his own self-knowledge. He asks himself, does this information align with what I know about myself and my goals? Is there a pattern here that I have been ignoring? Can I use this to improve my performance? The power shifts from the critic entirely to you. You are the chief analyst who decides whether the information is junk to be discarded or actionable intelligence to be used for your growth. This mindset transforms the paralyzing poison of criticism into an unlikely fuel for your development. Here are the practical tools. To master rule number 3, use criticism as fuel, not as poison. The first and most crucial tool is the 24-hour strategic pause. When you receive significant criticism, especially one that hits you emotionally, impose an iron rule on yourself. You are forbidden from responding, reacting, or drawing conclusions for 24 hours. This quarantine period is not an act of weakness, it is an act of power. It allows the red mist of the initial emotion, your amygdala in fight or flight mode, to dissipate. So your rational brain, the prefrontal cortex, can take command. Without this pause, you are a reactor. With it, you become a strategist. Within this 24-hour pause, you will apply the second tool, the analytical criticism diary. In a notebook or document, create an entry for the feedback received and dissect it with the coldness of a scientist. Create 4 distinct fields. First, the verbatim criticism. Write down exactly what was said without embellishment. X. Your report was confusing and superficial. Second, my hot reaction. Note the raw emotion. I felt anger, injustice, shame. This validates your feeling without letting it take control. Third, analysis for gold. After a few hours, come back and ask with brutal honesty. Removing the emotion, is there 1% of truth here? Is there a blind spot I'm not seeing? Could the clarity really be improved? Fourth, next wise action. Based on your analysis, define an action. If there is gold, the action might be, I will ask a colleague to read my next report before sending it. If it's just junk, the action is, I will consciously discard this feedback and focus on my next task. This process transforms an emotional wound into a continuous improvement cycle. Okay, continuing with the arsenal of tools for rule number 3, here are 2 more concrete and detailed solutions, carrying on with our operations manual for dealing with criticism productively and resiliently. Narration, lawyerly tone, building a case. The third tool in our arsenal for rule number 3 is summoning your internal defense attorney. When criticism strikes, your mind tends to become a courtroom where your inner critic acts as a relentless prosecutor, and you place yourself on the witness stand, already pleading guilty. To combat this, you need to consciously call in a defense attorney to ensure a fair trial. His job is not to lie or deny reality, but to introduce context, evidence, and a balanced perspective. When the prosecutor yells, "Your report was superficial," your defense attorney stands up and calmly questions, based on what evidence, which specific sections lacked depth. Let's consider the context. The deadline was 48 hours, a third of the normal time, and the track record of the last 10 reports, 9 were praised. Doesn't this suggest an outlier rather than a failure of competence? This process prevents a single criticism from becoming a condemnation of your identity. It transforms self-flagellation into a fair and fact-based self-assessment. The fourth tool is a proactive shield, value anchoring. Criticism has more power over us when we are disconnected from our own worth. Therefore, you need to create an anchor. Create today a digital document or a physical folder called evidence file. This file is your personal arsenal of self-validation. In it, you will keep screenshots of emails with praise from clients and colleagues, a detailed list of your 5 biggest professional successes, a clear statement of your values, e.g., integrity, creativity, rigor, and testimonials that prove your character. Before a high-pressure situation, like a performance review, or right after receiving criticism that has shaken you, you will perform a ritual. Take this file, read it for 5 minutes. Don't read it passively. Relive the successes. Feel the pride. Remind yourself of who you are based on a body of evidence, not on the isolated opinion of one person. Criticism is a gust of wind. Your evidence file is the lead anchor that prevents you from being carried away by the storm. The fifth and most transformative tool for rule number 3 is an act of mental alchemy, reframing for gratitude. This technique is the final blow against resentment. After having paused, analyzed, and anchored yourself, you will deliberately shift your perspective to one of gratitude, regardless of the nature of the criticism. If the criticism contained a useful truth, the gold, the mental refrain is, "I am grateful that this person had the courage to show me a blind spot that will help me grow. The momentary pain is a small price to pay for this clarity. You are grateful for the lesson." If the criticism was entirely false and unfair, the mental refrain becomes even more powerful. "I'm grateful for this opportunity to practice resilience. This person, without knowing it, has offered me a weight to strengthen the muscles of my patience and self-confidence. They gave me a stress test for my inner fortress, and I am passing." In both scenarios, you win. Gratitude is neurologically incompatible with resentment. By choosing to be grateful, you dissolve the poison and complete the transformation of criticism from a weapon against you into a tool at your service. Therefore, the journey to mastering criticism is not about building a thicker skin, but about developing a wiser and more strategic mind. It begins with the pause that gives you back the power, evolves into the analysis that separates the signal from the noise, is strengthened by a fair internal judgment, and is anchored in your non-negotiable base of value. Finally, it culminates in the alchemy of gratitude, which makes you immune to the poison of resentment. The unshakable Stoic is not the one who is never criticized. It is the one who has become a master in the art of transmuting the lead of others' opinions into the gold of self-knowledge. From today on, criticism ceases to be a verdict on who you are. It becomes just another piece of data on your control panel. You are in command. You decide what it means. and you decide how to use it as fuel for your journey. Rule number 4. Offense is a choice. Refuse to make it. If criticism is a direct attack that we can analyze, offense is a dark art. It's a poisoned knife that enters through the edges, often disguised as a joke, sarcasm, or an innocent comment. Imagine the scene. You are in an important meeting, presenting an idea you believe in. In the middle of your speech, a colleague interrupts you with a smirk and says something like, "That's a very idealistic view of things, don't you think?" And the tone makes it clear that idealistic means naive. Or perhaps, after an achievement of yours, someone comments, "Wow, you got lucky today, huh?" In that instant, the air grows heavy. Blood rushes to your face. You feel diminished, exposed in front of everyone. Your mind scrambles for a witty comeback, a defense, but it doesn't come. What's left is the awkward silence and the bitter taste of humiliation. But the real damage of offense doesn't happen in that public moment. It happens in the privacy of your mind, hours and days later. The event turns into a movie that you replay in an infinite loop. But now, in your head, you are the hero who has the perfect comebacks. You engage in imaginary dialogues, crushing your offender with your belated wit. The person ceases to be a simple colleague and becomes a villain in your personal narrative, and you start to look for confirmation of their malice in their every gesture. And what is the cost of this? You pay an exorbitant rent for this person to live for free in your head. Your mental energy, which should be focused on your projects, your family, your growth, is diverted to feed a useless resentment. Offense, when accepted, becomes an anchor of rancor that prevents you from navigating freely through life. The philosophy behind rule number 4 is perhaps the most liberating in all of Stoicism. It states that it is impossible for someone to offend you without your active cooperation. Epictetus teaches us that it is not events or words that disturb us, but our judgment about them. A sarcastic word, a veiled criticism, a gesture of disdain. In themselves, they are just noise and movement in the air, raw data. They only transform into the painful experience of offense at the exact moment your mind assents to that proposition. Think of offense as a pop-up notification that appears on the screen of your consciousness. It says, "You have been disrespected." You have the power to click on that pop-up, that is, to agree with the suggestion, feel anger, start the rumination loop, or you can, just as easily, move the cursor of your attention and click the X, closing the window and returning to what really matters. Offense is not something that is done to you. It is something you do to yourself by choosing to click on the pop-up. To strengthen your ability to close this window, the Stoics invite us to analyze the figure of the offender. Seneca reminds us that most of the time people who offend others do so out of ignorance, insecurity, or their own internal pain. Truly happy, confident, and virtuous people rarely feel the need to belittle others. Therefore, instead of seeing the offender as a powerful villain, train your mind to see them as a patient or a petulant child. You don't get offended by a sick person's cough or a baby's cry. You might feel compassion or simply move away, but you don't internalize the act as a personal attack. It is at this point that Marcus Aurelius's famous phrase becomes your new compass. The best revenge is to be unlike him who performed the injury. Your goal is no longer to win an imaginary battle, but to use the other's flawed behavior as a catalyst for your own excellence. This terminates the lease he had in your head. The offender is no longer your enemy. He becomes, unknowingly, a reminder for you to practice your virtue. These are the tactics to put rule number 4 into practice and become immune to the poison of offense. The first tool is the pause button and intention triage. In the exact instant you feel the sting of a comment, before anything else, press a mental pause button. Take one deep, conscious breath. The goal of this 1-second pause is to create a gap of lucidity between the stimulus and your reaction. In this gap, you become a detective and do a quick triage of the offender's possible intentions, starting with the most likely. 1. Was it ignorance? Is the person simply socially awkward? Do they have a reputation for speaking without thinking and likely didn't gauge the impact of their words? 2. Was it insecurity? Is the person feeling threatened, envious, or going through a bad time and used you as a target to alleviate their own pain? 3. Was it malevolence? Did the person deliberately and calculatedly actively want to hurt you? You will realize that in the vast majority of cases, the answer is number 1 or 2. This realization instantly disarms your anger, as you understand that the act was not about you, but about the other's limitation. Once you gain this internal control, the second tool deals with your external response, disarmament with humor or silence. If the environment allows and your personality is compatible, confident, self-deprecating humor is the most elegant weapon. To the comment, "That's a very idealistic view," you can smile calmly and say, "It's my charm." Sometimes it even works. This shows such unshakable self-confidence that the attempt at offense becomes ridiculous. The second path is calculated silence. Instead of rushing to defend yourself, you can simply pause for a little too long, look at the person with a neutral, curious expression, and then, without saying a word, continue your speech or address someone else. This silence is deafening. It communicates, "Your comment was so irrelevant that it doesn't justify the expenditure of my oxygen to respond to it." Both tactics refuse to validate the attack, keeping your dignity intact, and often returning the embarrassment to the one who initiated it. The third tool for rule number 4 is an internal investigation exercise called active cognitive reframing. After the dust settles, take a notebook and, instead of ruminating on the offense, investigate it with the following questions. First, what does this event teach me about the offender? This question already shifts the focus from you to them, revealing the insecurity or ignorance that motivated the act. Second, what does this event teach me about my own triggers? Perhaps you discover that you are particularly sensitive to feeling ignored, and this awareness is, in itself, a power. Third, how would the wisest, strongest version of myself react to this? This question forces you to access your ideal of conduct rather than your reactive reflex. And fourth, in what exact way can this experience strengthen me in the long run? Perhaps it teaches you to be clearer in your communication or to become even more independent of external validation. This exercise transforms what was an attack into a free consulting session for your self-development. The fourth and perhaps most liberating tool is the practice of selfish forgiveness. Understand this once and for all. Holding a grudge is like drinking poison and waiting for the other person to die. The only one who gets hurt is you. Forgiveness, in the Stoic view, is not a gift you give to the offender because they deserve it. It is an act of radical pragmatism that you perform for your own good. You don't need to announce it, you don't need to reconcile, and you certainly don't need to forget or approve of the act. Forgiveness is the act of evicting the tenant living rent-free in your head. Do this visualization exercise. Close your eyes, imagine the offender in front of you. Acknowledge the anger, and then say, aloud or to yourself, "I refuse to carry the weight of your mistake. For the sake of my peace and my energy, I release you from my mind. I forgive you." Visualize a cord connecting you to this person being cut, and feel the relief of reclaiming your mental space. You don't do it for them. You do it for you, because your peace is more valuable than the dubious pleasure of nursing a resentment. The final tool for rule number 4 is the ultimate antidote to the wounded ego, the community zoom out. When you feel offended, practice a mental zoom out. Step back from your personal pain and remember the Stoic idea of sympathia. We are all members of a single body, humanity. In this vast landscape, your personal offense loses the catastrophic importance your ego assigns to it. Then, redirect your energy to useful action. Ask yourself, instead of spending one more second on this feeling, what is the most constructive action I can take right now to help my team, my family, or my project? This shift in focus from the I to the we is what annihilates the offense at its root. In summary, mastery over offense is a journey that begins with a pause, passes through analysis, learns to disarm with intelligence and forgive with selfishness, and culminates in the transcendence of the ego itself. The truly unshakable person is not the one with the strongest armor, but the one whose purpose is so great that the small barbs of daily life simply can no longer find a target. Rule number 5. Dissect your fears, dissolve your shame. Fear and shame are the twin tyrants that keep us imprisoned. The fear of the future, of failing, of being judged, of the unknown, paralyzes us, preventing us from even trying. The shame of the past, of mistakes made, of humiliations suffered, haunts us, whispering that we are flawed and do not deserve to try again. For the Stoic, however, both are illusions. They are ghosts created not by the events themselves, but by our uncontrolled imagination. Fear is an overestimation of the threat and an underestimation of our ability to handle it. Shame is the interpretation of a lesson as if it were a life sentence. Stoic philosophy teaches us to stop running from these ghosts and to turn on the light of reason to see that they are nothing but smoke, generated by a flawed judgment that can and must be corrected. To dismantle fear, the main Stoic tool is the fragmentation of fear. Instead of being paralyzed by a large and vague fear like the fear of failure, take a pen and paper and dissect it into its smallest parts. What specifically do you fear? That a client will say no, that you will make a mistake in a spreadsheet, that your voice will tremble for 5 seconds during a presentation. Next to each of these micro-fears, write down the real and probable consequence. You will realize that the monster of fear, when exposed to the light of specificity, breaks down into a series of small and entirely manageable problems, moving your mind from panic to problem-solving mode. For shame, which is fear directed at the past, the first weapon is the re-judgment of the evidence. Look at the mistake that causes you shame not as a stain, but as enrollment in an expensive class. Ask yourself objectively, what was the exact lesson I learned here? What strength did I develop because of this pain? This transforms the event from a source of humiliation into a source of wisdom. The final weapon is proactive self-forgiveness. This is a conscious act of liberation. Tell yourself, the version of me that made that mistake did not have the knowledge I have today. The lesson has been learned and the debt is paid. This act of forgiveness is not about forgetting, but about refusing to continue being punished for a crime from which you have already extracted the lesson. It is cutting the anchor that ties you to the past so you can sail freely into the future. Rule number 6. Visualize failure to ensure success. Most of us live in one of two extremes, either in anxious pessimism, which paralyzes us, or in a fragile optimism, which shatters at the first sign of trouble. The pain of being caught by surprise is immense. The panic of a corrupted file before the presentation, the frustration of a cancelled flight, the chaos of a plan that falls apart. In that moment, emotion takes over, and we make bad decisions. Stoic philosophy offers a third way, a counterintuitive tool called premeditatio malorum, or the premeditation of evils. This is not being negative, it is being a strategist. The pessimist sees the storm and despairs. The naive optimist denies the storm's existence. The Stoic sees the storm forming on the horizon and calmly reinforces the windows, gathers the supplies, and prepares the lanterns. By visualizing the worst-case scenarios beforehand, you rob them of their power of shock and transform fear into preparation. The most robust way to apply rule number 6 is with the pre-mortem technique. Before starting any important endeavor, imagine you have traveled forward in time and the project has failed miserably. From that perspective, ask yourself or your team, what exactly went wrong? List all the possible causes: communication breakdowns, technical problems, insufficient resources, etc. Then, for each potential cause of failure, develop a preventive action. What will we do now to avoid this? And a contingency plan. If it happens anyway, how will we react to minimize the damage? This exercise transforms anxiety about the future into strategic planning in the present. For day-to-day life, the practice is simpler. Use the "what if" journal. As you look at your tasks for the day, spend 30 seconds on each and ask yourself, what if the client cancels at the last minute? What if the internet goes down during the call? Having a mentally rehearsed answer, e.g., I'll use the time to get ahead on another task, or I'll use my phone's 4G as a backup, immunizes you against panic. Finally, adopt the mindset of the Stoic reserve clause. Add a silent, "if nothing prevents it," to all your plans. This isn't pessimism. It's the humble recognition that the external world has its own plans. When an obstacle arises, your mind doesn't collapse. It simply recognizes the condition that has been met and calmly activates the contingency plan. Rule number 7. The event is neutral. The reaction is everything. This is the simplest and, at the same time, the most difficult rule of all. The default human condition is to feel like a victim of circumstances. Traffic makes us late, the economy hurts us, a layoff ruins our career. We feel that life happens to us and that we are the passive result of these events. This victim mentality generates resentment, blame, and above all, helplessness. However, the central pillar of Stoicism, famously articulated by Epictetus, declares that it is not events that disturb us, but our judgments about them. The event itself, the layoff, the diagnosis, the betrayal, is a raw, neutral fact. It only acquires the color of tragedy or disaster through the story we tell ourselves. Your true and impregnable strength lies not in preventing events from happening, but in mastering the space between the event and your reaction, and in that space, choosing a response that strengthens you. In practice, to master the space between stimulus and response, the first tactic is the strategist's breath. In the instant an adverse event occurs, your only immediate task is one. Take one deep conscious breath. This simple physiological act is a circuit breaker that interrupts the emotional short circuit, giving you a second of clarity. In that second, you ask yourself the most powerful question in the Stoic arsenal: how can I use this? Not why me, which is the victim's question, but how can I use this? How can I use this failure to learn? How can I use this offense to practice patience? How can I use this loss to cultivate resilience? This question transforms any event, no matter how negative, into raw material for your character. With the space created and the purpose found, the final step is the choice of your response. Think of it as a menu of virtuous responses. Instead of the default reaction of anger or despair, you can deliberately choose to respond with wisdom by taking a step back to analyze, justice by acting correctly and with balance, courage by facing the difficulty head-on, or temperance by maintaining calm and moderation. This freedom of choice is your supreme power. The psychiatrist Viktor Frankl, a survivor of the concentration camps, concluded that the last of the human freedoms is to choose one's attitude in any given set of circumstances. Even if the world takes everything from you, no one can take away your power over how you decide to respond. Mastering this choice is the essence of being unshakable. Rule number 8. Master the impulse. Master the outcome. If the previous rule was about the power of how to react, this one is about the power of often not reacting at all. Think about your biggest regrets. How many of them were born from an impulsive action? The harsh word said in the heat of an argument, the angry email sent late at night, the impulse purchase that sabotaged your finances, the sarcastic comment that hurt a friend. The pain of impulsivity is the pain of self-sabotage, where we become the architects of our own problems by failing to control a single moment. Stoic philosophy, especially through the virtue of temperance, self-control, teaches us that deliberate action is always superior to compulsive reaction. The pause is not a sign of hesitation or weakness. It is the hallmark of a disciplined mind that refuses to be a slave to its own reflexes. True strength lies not in the speed of your response, but in its wisdom. To forge this discipline in practice, the first tool is the 2-second rule. Before any significant action, speaking, in an argument, sending an important email, making a purchase, impose a 2-second pause on yourself. In that brief space, ask a check-in question. Before speaking, ask, does this need to be said? Does it need to be said by me? And does it need to be said now? Before sending, ask, how would I feel if I received this message tomorrow morning? This simple habit acts as a mental speed bump, giving your rational mind time to intercept and evaluate the impulses of your emotional mind, preventing countless unforced errors. To strengthen this capability in the long run, the second tool is gratification postponement as muscle training. Treat your self-control like a muscle that needs to be exercised to grow. Practice with small things. Feel the urge to check your phone and deliberately wait 5 minutes. Postpone the piece of chocolate until after dinner. Work in focused 25-minute blocks before giving yourself the reward of a coffee. Every small victory against a short-term impulse strengthens your willpower. Thus, when a major emotional impulse arises, the urge to explode in anger or make a rash decision, your discipline muscle will already be trained, stronger, and ready to handle the load, transforming self-control into a habit, not a Herculean effort. Rule number 9, accept reality to be able to change it. One of the greatest sources of human suffering is the war we wage against reality. We fight against what has already happened. A mistake made, a loss. Suffered, an outcome we cannot change. This resistance is like trying to row against a waterfall. It is exhausting, futile, and only intensifies our pain, keeping us trapped in a cycle of denial and bitterness. Stoicism offers us a powerful, yet often misunderstood way out: acceptance. It is crucial to understand that acceptance is not passivity or approval. You don't have to like what happened. Acceptance is simply the act of looking at reality, without filters and without drama, and saying, this is what it is. It is the calm, factual recognition of your current situation. This act is the mandatory starting point for any change, because the moment you stop wasting energy fighting what you cannot change, that same energy is freed up to focus on what you can. To practice this radical acceptance in real life, the first tool is the declaration of reality. Faced with an immutable fact, instead of fighting, declare it aloud, or in writing as neutrally as possible. Not, it's a disaster, that I was fired, but simply, my employment contract was terminated. Not, I can't believe I made that mistake, but I made this mistake. Repeat the fact until it loses its emotional charge and becomes just information. This act of verbalization transfers the problem from your emotional brain, which panics, to your rational brain, which begins to think about solutions. Once reality is accepted as a fact, the next step is to break out of paralysis. Ask yourself the fork-in-the-road question. Okay, this is the scenario. I can spend my energy suffering over what I don't control, or I can use that energy to act on what I do control. Which path serves me better? With the decision to act made, use the minimum first step tactic. Inertia is overcome with a small movement. The step is not solve the problem, but send an email, make a phone call, or tidy up the desk. The formula is simple: factual acceptance plus logical choice. Minimum action. This is the ladder that pulls you out of any pit of inaction. Rule number 10. Live in harmony with your true nature. We have arrived at the rule that is not just a commandment, but the result of all the others. The deepest pain of modern life is that of misalignment. The feeling of chasing goals that don't fulfill us, of wearing masks that exhaust us, and of living a life that deep down doesn't feel like our own. The ultimate goal of Stoicism is to heal this fracture, inviting us to live according to nature. This doesn't mean moving to a forest. It means living according to what makes us human at our best, our capacity to be rational and social. To be rational is to use reason to cultivate virtue, clarity, and inner peace. Everything we've practiced in the previous 9 rules. To be social is to recognize that we are part of an interconnected whole, and that a full life involves contributing to the good of that whole. To live according to nature is, therefore, to align your daily actions with your deepest values, using your inner strength to serve yourself and others. To discover and align with your true nature in practice, use 2 tools. The first is the reverse epitaph exercise. Imagine yourself on your deathbed, looking back with pride. What would you like to have been? What values would you like to have lived by? What contribution would you like to have left behind? The answers form your true North Star. The second tool is the daily alignment review. At the end of each day, ask yourself, did my actions today move me closer to or further away from the ideal I wrote in my reverse epitaph? This is your daily GPS to stay on the course of your purpose. With your purpose clear, the final step is to live it through deliberate contribution. Living according to our social nature requires action. Every day, look for a small opportunity to serve the common good. Help a colleague, listen to a friend with full attention, be kind to a stranger. This act of contribution completes the Stoic circle. It takes all the strength and peace you have cultivated internally and projects them out into the world. You stop asking, what can life give me? And start living the question, what can I give to life? It is in this union of inner serenity and useful action that true happiness and a mind that is not only unshakable but also profoundly meaningful resides. Over these last few minutes, we have not only explored 10 ancient rules, we have deconstructed the architecture of suffering and replaced it with the engineering of resilience. You may have started this journey feeling like a drifting boat at the mercy of the storm of circumstances. Now, you are no longer the boat, you are the captain. You understand that power lies not in controlling the wind or the waves, but in mastering the rudder of your reaction and the compass of your purpose. Criticism, offense, fear, and failure are no longer monsters to be feared, but raw material to be used, data to be analyzed, opportunities to practice virtue. You hold the keys to your inner citadel. The tools to be mentally unbreakable are no longer in a distant philosophy, but in your hands, ready to be used. But philosophy only comes to life through action. Your journey of mastery begins now with your next deliberate step. Use the comments section below and share with us. Which of these 10 rules resonated with you the most at this exact moment in your life? Reading and sharing each other's journeys is part of our growth as a community. If you are committed to continuing to strengthen your mind and building a life of purpose and serenity, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you don't miss any chapter of our journey. Thank you for your attention and for your courage to seek a stronger version of yourself. Stay strong, and I'll see you in the next video.